Tomorrow is Prisoners' Justice Day. It's an amazing work of propaganda, and it's celebrated by every left-wing media outlet, PhD criminologist, and soft-on-crime politician out there. I mean, just look at the words, prisoners' justice. It's a moral inversion. It's criminals asking to be treated like victims, claiming that they're the ones who need justice. It's people who have harmed others, claiming to have been harmed. White is black, right is wrong. Murderers are now victims. It's those who have violated justice now demanding justice for themselves. Of course, what they really want is not justice. They want the absence of justice. They want to avoid justice. They want to escape justice. They want to thwart justice. They want to get out of justice, which is why they're working so hard at destroying the meaning of that word. Of course, being prisoners, they have their own website. Did you know prisoners get websites these days? They have their own T-shirts, too. Seriously, my friends, I bet you a dollar that they receive government grants for their work, too. It's just a hunch I have. They even have rallies. Seriously. What are they on about? What do these prisoners want? Well, according to their list of demands from their prisoners' website, they want more access to tattoos in jail. They want an end to having prison roommates. Each prisoner should have their own suite. They don't want to bunk up. Law-abiding people in the real world sometimes have to have roommates. You know, students do, people who can't afford a big house do, but that's just too shabby for our criminal friends. These criminals demand the right to vote, a right Canada's courts have been happy to give them. Yes, in Canada, you see, lawbreakers get to be the lawmakers. They want a right to unionize, a union for criminals. I wonder which union would want to organize them. Would that be CUPE or PSAC? Because it surely would be a government union, right? And my favorite, these criminals want a moratorium on new prison construction, and I'm quoting here, the eventual abolition of prisons. Of course they do. Because if there's no prisons, there can't be any prisoners, right? The final step, of course, is to abolish the criminal code, because if there are no crimes, then there can be no criminals. Problem solved. Here's a home movie of a convicted murderer named Brenda Blondell speaking a few years ago at a Prisoners' Justice Day rally. Let's listen for a moment to this. Check it out.
No health care, no dentist, poor hygiene, getting ripped off, no respect, no dignity. Hard, consistent work, conditions on how much you can personally achieve or have in life. No reasons why, no answers, not getting what I want.
Not getting what I want. That's what these prisoners are mad about. You know, it's so tough to be a convicted murderer. It's so unfair. You don't get what you want. That's got to change. You know, Blondell wasn't the only convicted murderer speaking at that same Prisoners' Justice Day rally. You're watching her husband now, Thomas Elton, too. He's also a convicted murderer. Two convicted murderers hooked up. Isn't that sweet? Husband and wife tag team murderers. I wonder how they met. I mean, I've heard of the dating website Lava Life. Maybe these two met on Lava Death. I can imagine their singles profile. I like long walks in the prison yard in moonlight. Pet peeves include those nosy parole officers. My friends say I committed a crime of passion, but passion can't be a crime. Just don't break my heart, or I'll rip yours out. Oh, these two actually got married. That's a reality show in the making, if I ever heard of one. It gives Survivor a whole new meaning, doesn't it? But these two convicted murderer lovebirds are the face of the Prisoners' Justice Day movement. That was them at a rally in a park. Two hardened criminals, two murderers. But did you listen to Blondell? She's a thug. So's her husband. They're evil. They're animals. But they have perfectly learned to speak the language of university faculty lounges. They know how to play the victim, how to pull on the heartstrings of liberals, how to manufacture grievances against police and prisons and society. Nothing's ever their fault. They never have to take responsibility, and they sure as hell don't owe anybody an apology. I only played a few moments of their comments to you, but I listened to everything they said. Never once a moment of contrition or apology or penitence. Never once accepting that they committed an immoral act. Just whining. No wonder the media party loves these types. But how does the story end? How did these two lovebird murderers end? Well, you know, when the cameras were off, Blondell and Elton went back to their normal selves, and 2 years ago, police were called to their little love nest, and Elton was charged with murdering his wife, Blondell, and that's the thing. We pretend that prisoners are just like us. Maybe misunderstood, maybe a little bad luck. That the word criminal is too judgmental. That all we need is to be nicer to them, and they won't commit their crimes. You know, that's been Canada's official policy for 40 years. Pierre Trudeau, who started Canada down this road, made the change in 1971. His Solicitor General announced the policy clearly. He's actually what he said. Too many Canadians regard the fact that the correctional process aims at making the offender a useful and law-abiding citizen and not anymore an individual alienated from society and in conflict with it. Consequently, and here's the main part, we have decided from now on to stress the rehabilitation of individuals rather than protection of society, unquote. Did you get that? Protection of society doesn't count. That's not important. Being nice to murderers is what counts. Even 40 years ago and still today, they didn't even call it justice. They called it corrections. It's still called Correctional Services Canada. They don't even like to use the word prisons. And if these folks just need to be corrected on a few things, hey, no problem. Look, there are different goals to our justice system. Protecting the public is obviously a big one. That's the one that Trudeau abandoned. That's why convicted murderers are routinely let out on parole after just 10 years. Rehabilitation of the criminal, giving them free college or hobbies, is clearly more important today to criminologists. But what about punishment? What about a criminal actually showing remorse? That's what the word penitentiary means, a place where people show remorse or prove their regret. That's the root of the word in Latin. Regret? Ha! Come on, remorse? Hardly. It's about self-esteem and free tattoos and the right to unionize. The word punishment is almost absent from modern criminal justice. Here's some footage from the criminal riots in the UK. Do you think these people need rehabilitation? No. Do you think they just need to be understood? No. They need punishment. They need to be penitent. Let's switch riots just for a second. Let's zero in on one particular person, our friend from Vancouver, Camille Casneil. Remember her? Take a look at that. There she goes. There's a video of her looting from a men's clothing store in Vancouver during the Stanley Cup riot. Look at that beatific smile on her face. Remember her? She wrote a long blog entry explaining that she just got caught up in things, that she's not an evil person, really. After all, she's studying environmentalism at UBC. Remember that excuse? Now, Camille Casneil is not a genuine threat to public safety in the future. I mean, let's be honest. She doesn't need rehabilitation. What she needs is the one thing our criminal justice system is no longer designed to give her: punishment. She needs to be punished. Without it, there's a justice deficit. You heard me, a deficit of justice, not just an economic deficit. I mean, the store owner will surely not recover the cost of the riot, and neither will insurance companies, and neither will taxpayers. So we have a tangible deficit of justice, but we also have a moral deficit of justice. As a society, we agree amongst ourselves not to be violent with one another, but to give a monopoly of violence to the state, and to give the state the power to prosecute and punish criminals. But Casneil hasn't even been charged yet. And if she's charged, I'm sure she'll be let off with a slap on the wrist. And so public confidence in the justice system is eroded. And if public confidence in the police and courts is eroded, there comes a breaking point when people will take justice into their own hands. Camille Casneil is at the opposite end of the spectrum from the murdering lovebirds. But each of them are evidence that our legal system is no longer a justice system, that our correction system is no longer a penitentiary system, that there are fewer and fewer penalties for criminals at all, and that criminals' voices are heard louder and given more respect than those of victims. Prisoners' Justice Day? No thanks. I think we should rechristen August 10th as Victims' Justice Day. Over the next few segments, we'll be exploring justice, but after the break, a prisoner rights advocate takes me to task. That's next on The Source. You know what? You know me. I've got a strong point of view, but that doesn't mean I don't listen to the other point of view, especially if it's someone who spent their life, really working with prisoners. And joining me today is Gary Glowacki. He's an organizer for Prisoners' Justice Day and an organizer with Bridge Prison Ministries. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Look, Gary, you and I disagree on some things. Let's start by looking for common ground. I believe that prisons themselves should be safe. That is, I don't think there should be violence or rape within a prison. I think we should make sure that if someone's in jail, they should be protected. Obviously, you agree with that.
Yes.
But how far further than that do you want to go?
Well, I believe that the community also is entitled to incredible safety, right? And I'm not sure that just simply locking people away, giving them limited resources, limited treatment programs, and releasing them to even less resources in the community is in any way, shape, or form keeping the community safe.
So, okay, fair enough. But what's your solution? Do you want? Let me ask you this. I just looked it up today. Murderers in this country, second-degree murders, typically out after 10 years. Mm-hmm. What do you think of that? Do you think that? I think that it should be longer. What do you think?
Depends on what's happened within the prison, and people being released from prison at 10 years have, in a sense, earned the right to be released through their behavior, through their modification, through the treatment programs. You know, statistically, you'd also have to look at what are the probabilities of their reoffending, right?
Well, it seemed to me to be quite high. We just talked about a case, murder of a girl in Winnipeg. The guy who murdered her had 3 rape convictions.
Right, absolutely, and that's probably the other end of it. I work with men who have offended and done some horrible things and are out of jail for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and doing well and contributing to society and paying their taxes and having their lives restored. And so there's both sides.
You know, I'm not going to disagree with you that we should probably give attention to men who have been released after they're released.
Right.
But I was looking through the Prisoners Justice Day website.
Yes.
There was stuff there about tattoos, about unions, a prisoner's union. That stuff. I mean, you're coming across as a reasonable guy who's trying to help integrate these men after being released. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. But what I'm seeing on this website is they want it to be more fun in jail. I ran a clip of a woman, Miss Blondell, who's now been murdered herself, saying, "I want the right to do what I please." Basically, I mean, it was a list of grievances that I think people listening say, you know what, you're a murderer. You don't have the right to be to want these things. What do you think?
Fair enough. I'll agree with that. I would dearly love to be able to do what I want to do, but I don't have that
right. None of
right.
us have that
right, exactly. So that's an unfair request to say I want to do what I want to do. And you can do that, but you have to reap the consequences of that. So, you know, the old saying, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
But here's a guy playing, just on the screen, playing video games in prison. I mean, you know, what's that? What's that? Is that rehabilitation? That's not even rehabilitation.
What is it then?
It's a guy having a recreational activity. Come on, you're not going to video game rehabilitation. Please tell me you're not.
No, but I am calling it recreation, which maybe isn't anything that you might think he should be entitled to, but he's going to be released at some point and go back to his life. I know they've talked about club fed, where prisoners are on golf courses and do all kinds of things and live on their own, and it's not a harsh environment at all. Other than the fact that simply going to prison is a harsh environment at all. They've lost lots of their rights, the right to see their family when they want to, the rights to move around. They're really quite segregated from society. And so many rights are taken away from them, but there are also many privileges that they can earn through their own behaviors, and many men are doing without anything in prison. Some are in maximum security segregation, and many are earning privileges on their way out the door, as they should. You know, people in some of the institutions, they have keys to their own property, they do their own shopping, because you can't simply release a man who's done 20 years in prison with no resources and put him out here and have him say, "I'm sorry, what's the PIN number?"
Yeah.
That's unfair to the community at large, not just to the man, but to the community at large.
I agree there should be a transition. I just don't think the transition should come so early. I got a question for you.
Fair enough.
In my opening remarks, I talked about taking moral responsibility, showing regret, being penitent.
Absolutely.
How important is that? And
to me?
Well, yeah.
Absolutely.
And should people be let out of jail, should a murderer be let out of jail without taking full, meaningful, not just faking it, not just being an actor, but moral responsibility for what they're doing?
That's up to the parole board, and
I want to talk about the parole board.
Sure,
I think the parole board rubber stamps thing. I want someone who, if they're going to get a shortcut on their sentence, I want to see believable, credible remorse. I want to see a man whose heart acknowledges he did evil and swears to be a reformer.
And if you can do that, you let me know.
Yeah, and until that comes, I want them in jail.
Okay, prisons were initially started, and penitentiaries were developed by the Quakers for men and women, but primarily men, to do their penance. They were left in there and they were left in isolation to think about the wrongs they'd committed, to do their penance, and then be brought back in the community because they were still considered to be an important part of the community itself. We've lost that. I think we have. We've lost that completely, where if you're an ex-offender, if you're a felon, a prisoner, you've lost a lot of the rights as being human. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily the way to go, because we are no longer put in a situation where men are pushed to be penitent. I'm a big proponent on restorative justice, which is also about accountability, absolute accountability, because it's foolish to do otherwise. Right? So,
Gary, you know what? Forgive me. We have run out of time. I would like to have you back on the show again. There's a lot of things that you have dealt with that are real issues that I think we should address, and in a more serious, sober-minded, responsible way than some of the outrageous demands of this Prisoner's Justice Day. Will you come back on our show another time? Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Cheers. Folks, that's Gary Glowacki from Prisoners' Rights. Oh, he's going away. Hey, that's okay. After the break, we'll talk with Sun Media crime reporter Tom Broadbeck about one of the most heartbreaking cases of victim injustice to come out of Winnipeg. That's ahead on The Source. Welcome back. You know, I didn't properly introduce that behind the bars thing. All day today show and the other primetime talk shows tonight, we're going to be talking about Canada's prison system. As I mentioned, tomorrow is Prisoners' Justice Day, and it's the day that the consensus media wants to celebrate the criminals. Well, I don't want to. I want to talk about victims' rights. And so me and the other guys tonight, that's what we'll be talking about. And joining me now, live from our Winnipeg studio, is Tom Broadbeck, a columnist with the Winnipeg Sun and an expert in criminal justice matters. Tom, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Hi, Ezra. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing well. I'm a little revved up because I think that, you know, yes, we have to rehabilitate someone if we can. And I don't think that prisons should be anarchic places where criminals are beat up or raped. I don't believe in that. But I think that the pendulum has tilted so far towards criminals that we've lost sight of other parts of our justice system, like punishment, like denunciation. Are those completely absent from our justice system, Tom?
Well, they've been largely ignored for years, and it seems increasingly so. I mean, there is language in the Criminal Code of Canada for sentencing, denunciation you mentioned, deterrence, general and specific. Sentences are supposed to be proportionate to the gravity of the offense. Those principles, those sentencing principles that are set out in the Criminal Code, just seem to be ignored increasingly in our court system in favor of rehabilitation and protecting the rights of criminals, repeat violent criminals in some cases, over public safety and the rights of victims. There are no rights for victims. It doesn't exist. You know, it's funny, I want to get back to that victims issue, and you said a lot of important things there, Tom, but you talked about rehabilitation. Now, when I hear the word rehab, I think of someone who's got an addiction and they need to break it, or an illness. So, you know, you broke your leg, so you're going to rehab for physiotherapy. To me, that's treating moral crimes as a sickness. Oh, he's not evil. He just got sick. We just need to heal him. And to me, that's denying the essential nature of crime. I mean, in Latin, lawyers would say mens rea, the mental element, that you chose to do evil. What do you think, Tom? I mean, is the whole idea of rehabilitation just a joke to truly evil people like Karla Homolka? I mean, come on, does anyone really think that she can be rehabilitated? I mean, there are some people that are beyond rehabilitation, and we should be using more indeterminate sentences where you're put away for an indeterminate period, and if somehow you can demonstrate perhaps in 10, 15, 20 years down the line that you've changed, and you're assessed by professionals as low risk, maybe, just maybe, we should let you out. But we don't use indeterminate sentences that often, dangerous offender status. We should be using far more of it. We let people out. We have police agencies and justice departments that warn the public in some cases when sexual offenders are let out. They let them out and say, you know, your kids are at risk. Here's a picture of the guy. He might be moving into your neighborhood. And you sit back and you go, what have we done here? Yeah. This is insane. Could you imagine, Tommy, the way you describe that, it's so blunt, you're so right. I mean, the cops know he's a danger. They're warning you that he's a danger, but they're not doing anything about it. Imagine just for a second, Tom, if it was, I'm just going to say, a car company that manufactured a car that they knew was dangerous, and they sold it anyways and just said, oh, be careful, this car is dangerous, it might blow up. They'd be sued into submission. How can we let the government do things that they know are putting people at a risk, and we don't hold them to the same standards we would a private company? Absolutely, and you know, I've heard people say that. Some of the comments I come back when we write about this stuff, and I comment on some of the sexual offenders that are released and the warnings that come with their release, and people write me and say, why isn't someone suing you know, a future victim of that person who is released? Why isn't there a tort case? Why aren't they suing the government for knowingly basically releasing a wild animal into your community, and somebody gets bit?
Yeah. You know, talking about wild animals, I want to talk about a terrible, terrible case from your neck of the woods out there in Winnipeg. It's the case of Candace Dirksen, who was a 13-year-old girl who was murdered. And finally, and I'll let you tell the details in a second, but the man who was convicted this year, here's what stands out to me. He had 3 convictions for rape over the last 23 years. What is a guy who has been convicted for rape or convicted for any capital crime being let go anyways? I mean, how many crimes, Tom, are committed by people who were let out and committed a crime again while they were on parole or probation?
And you know, and that's really the important thing here is, and you get back to dangerous offender status and how we don't use it enough. I mean, Mark Grant, who was convicted of second-degree murder of Candace Dirksen from a crime he committed in '84, it didn't get solved till '07 with DNA. You know, what's a guy like that ever doing back out on the streets? I mean, he was convicted of second-degree murder with no eligibility of parole for 25 years. He's appealing. I wouldn't be surprised if the Court of Appeal knocks that down, you know, because 25 years without parole sometimes is considered to be cruel and unusual punishment, even for violent killers in this country. But we'll see what happens with that appeal. But I mean, a guy like that, how is he not a dangerous offender, and how is he not given an indeterminate sentence?
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, 3 rape convictions. I mean, for God's sakes, letting him out on the street for 1 minute, aren't you just begging for a fourth? I want to ask you a political question, okay? I mean, every once in a while, a crime is committed that's so horrendous that regular folks who are not part of the political system or the legal system, they get outraged. Obviously, Paul Bernardo is such an example. And all of a sudden, the whole country talks about stiffer sentences, getting rid of easy parole, life in jail. Some people even talk about capital punishment. But then it fades, and all the regular people go back to their normal lives, and the only people left talking about it are these so-called experts, the PhD criminologists, who all have a more liberal view. Tom, how is it possible to harness the anger of Canadians during these once-in-a-while horrific crimes to change it, instead of letting it go back to the professional criminologists 99% of the time?
I get the feeling that there is more sustained outcry now than, say, 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, we have a federal government in place now that has made some pretty concrete changes, and hopefully they'll make more. And now that they have a majority government, they don't have an opposition that can sabotage some of the reform that we need. But I think we need far more harnessing. I agree with you. It is frustrating. You go through periods where, you know, people are outraged and they think, how can this happen? And we kind of say, well, that's what we've been talking about for the last 6 months. You know, that's why we want changes to the criminal code, more minimum sentences, more indeterminate sentences, getting rid of things like statutory release and these outrageous early paroles. That's exactly what it speaks to, and I agree. We need more sustained pressure from the public, but I think it's coming.
Tom Broadbeck, from your mouth to God's ears, I hope it's coming, because we sure need it. Appreciate you joining us from our Winnipeg studios. That's Tom Broadbeck. He's a columnist with Winnipeg Sun. Hey, after the break, I got a different question for you folks. Where are the atheists in the battle to separate mosque and state? I'm talking about the Toronto District School Board again. That's all ahead on The Source.